Тоді пропоную переходити
Then
до
I would suggest to move to the next session. And now I would like to hand over the floor to Olga Golovko. Olga, are you here? Yes, I am. That's our Olga. Of course, we want to thank you. She's the mediator, PhD in law, senior researcher and associate professor at Igor Sikorsky, Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. And most importantly, she's the voice of our Ukraine's Academy of Mediation. She is responsible for public relations. Everything that you can see about the Academy, this is all done by Olga. And you're aware that the forum is underway today. You know the agenda, and this can be done and thanked to Olga. We can anytime talk about business till 3 or 4 in the morning. Oh, do not disclose all the secrets, Louisa. Okay, I'm going to hand over the floor to you, Olga, so that you continue to run our next session. Thank you so much. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all the participants. I actually have an honorable mission today, since I have to introduce to you Alona Horova. She is going to be delivering the workshop on managing polarities in the mediation process. And I'm so happy to introduce Alona to you because actually I myself had this great experience of learning a lot from her. And I definitely know that those who are with us, who made it till the very late hour, they now can enjoy this beautiful moment. This is like a little strawberry or cherry on the top of the cake. So Alona is the head, the co-founder of Peace and Common Ground Institute, group conflict mediator with 20 plus years of experience in restorative justice and peace building. Actually, during the last 10 years, Alona has been mediating for the Ombudsman's office at the World Bank. And I have to tell you that she has colossal experience, both as a national and international expert in mediation. And the floor is yours. Over to you, Olga. Oh, sorry, Alona. Good evening. Hello, everybody. I feel very sorry that I could only join you right now and be able to listen just a little piece of the great presentation done by Catherine Kotsaki, because I believe mentorship is so much needed, and this is essential to build capacity of the mediation community, any community virtually that works with ADR, and all the people who work with other people. And mediators are even more important. This is an important ingredient for that. Again, once again, thank you for the invitation and this opportunity to talk to you with this respected audience. I hope that we will handle it properly within this hour. Maybe we're going to shorten it a little bit, but I hope that it was going to work out well. Olga, can you tell me if you can say yes or just give me a nod, whether the participants could be able to ask my questions? Yes, in the chat, of course, surely. All right.
Я ще буквально на секундочку зорієнтую по таймінгу. У нас десь плюс-мінус 40-45 хвилин.
Tell you about timeline. We have roughly 40 to 45 minutes, as the agenda says. Then we want to leave some space for questions and answers. Okay, I'm going to start with my question. I don't know if you're aware of the topic of this presentation or not, but the surprise is about, and this cherry on the cake, or whatever it is, we're going to be talking about a very interesting thing, which is called polarity or polarization. And we're going to be trying to think together about how polarization gets different from the conflict, or they're no different, or this is just the same thing. I built my workshop. It is called the workshop, so that you can practice a little bit. At a certain point, I'm going to ask you to work in the groups of 3 and try to handle some of the practical exercises to build your skills on how to build and manage those polarities, etc. So please be ready to exercise, to be doing something, unless you don't want to. So I'm going to ask to answer one question in the chat. And here's the question itself. Have you ever had, in your experience, situations when you're listening to the parties of the process, whether it is facilitation or mediation, and all of a sudden, it gets very clear to you that both parties are absolutely correct and they make sense. And at the same time, they seem to be talking about the same thing. However, they seem to be right and they sound great, but at the same time, their opinions are radically different. And they cannot have any amicable resolution. You cannot even imagine how you can appease those two parties or do something else with them to reconcile. Have you ever had any situation like this? And if you can just say in a couple of words regarding this conflict in your particular case.
Зараз я поширю екран трішки. Так. Ага, ніби має бути все добре. Так. Так. Ага, але я тепер не бачу чат. Ні, бачу, я зможу бачити чат. Я бачила, що хтось... Так. Сімейні пари поділ.
Now we can see the slides. Okay, in property cases. Please make it full screen whenever you have a chance.
Я це зроблю пізніше.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it a bit later. Don't worry.
Заставочка, на якому написана тема, я потім це зроблю. Тут є Юлій Корольчук, який написав,
We have Yuri Korolchuk, who wrote that family couples sometimes have arguments about property. It seems like both parties are right sometimes, but their opinions are not amicable at all. They contradict to each other. Okay, yes. I see people had those situations. I think everybody has come across something like this because each party has its own world and his or her vision. That's why the conflict appeared. Let me reformulate my question. Where's the difference between actually the conflict and polarity, if there is any? What are the key factors about the conflict versus polarity?
Конфлікт і полярність. Розірвання шлюбу, поділ майна.
Okay, when it is about property,
Є такі
or
речі.
dissolution of marriage.
Все, що написано в чатику, воно схоже на конфлікт більше, ніж на
So
полярність.
far, it looks like conflict rather than polarity, or division of property, whatever it is.
Так. Полярність тут може взагалі не перетинатися інтерес. Так. Сторони залишаються при своїй позиції.
Parties can sometimes defend their own opinions. Okay, the conflict is when there is a clash of values and ideas. And polarity, this is about parallel processes. Yeah, that's interesting. Polarity is when positions are radically different, opposing. Then I'm going to wrap up this screen sharing and we're going to move to something else. But again, Olga, try to help me a little bit.
Альон, поки підключаєте...
Okay, Alona, while you're connecting this, there's one more point. We are unfortunately unable to go to the breakout rooms because it was not envisaged. I think we're going to be communicating through the chat, and whenever there are questions in the end, we're going to let people ask the questions out loud. All right, that's going to work that way. So let us change it a little bit. We're going to be doing it in the presentation format. I'm going to be coming back to my questions again. So please be more active in the chat. That's the way we're going to work. Anyways, for you to be able to see the presentation, hopefully you can see it. This is my name, about my experience, and we already discussed some of those issues already on the slide.
Коли ми говоримо про якісь, скажімо,
When we're
полярності
talking about
інтереси, то насправді ми
um,
говоримо про
opposing
різні
interests and
конфлікти.
polarity, we're talking about different dimensions here.
Якщо ми повернемося до визначення, власне кажучи, конфлікту, то ми
When we're
пам'ятаємо
talking about conflict, we need to clearly remember that the conflict is
зіткнення
clashing
інтересів.
interests.
Вони можуть суперечити,
They can be
можуть
contradicting to each
не
other, they can
можуть
sometimes
бути
not,
явними,
sometimes this
Йдеться
clash
про
can be
інтереси.
evident, sometimes not, but it's all about interests
Класи
anyways.
інтересів можуть
It is
бути
all around
дуже
interest, and
різними.
there can be a lot of emotion around that.
Слово дуже
But I would
логічне.
use that word, the emotions are quite sometimes very logical. One can make sense why those emotions occur.
Скажімо так, не дуже, але
Relatively
можна
speaking, they can be operationalized.
Емоція, вона ніби
Every emotion
свідчить про якісь,
is an
там,
evidence,
неприємна, да?
if this is an
Людина
unpleasant emotion, is an
свідчить про
evidence
незадоволення,
of dissatisfaction, unsatisfied interest. We have to find the emotion,
і так далі. Тобто,
find out what the interests are.
з точки зору, ну, такої
With
логіки,
conflict, from this simple logic standpoint, it seems to be much easier. Working with conflicts, it's really logical, structured, and consistent.
коли працюємо з
Yes,
конфліктами,
whenever
ми
we
працюємо з емоціями.
come across a conflict, we normally work with emotions, but those emotions
Абсолютно
have a
раціональна
very rational background.
інтерес порушений. Хтось
Certain
не
interests
бачить,
are breached. Somebody cannot see the way to satisfy his or her interest, one of the parties or both parties,
задача
and it is our task
конфлікту.
in working with conflicts to find that interest, find out
Коли ми говоримо про
what the interest is.
полярності,
And when speaking about polarity,
говоримо про те, що це абсолютно
we're trying to say that this is
ірраціональне.
the irrational area or domain.
Полярності, вони базуються
Polarities are based on our identity,
і це про
the way we identify ourselves. This is about our values, of course, or values of those people who ended up in a polarized situation.
І полярності, вони
And those polarities
операціоналізуються
are
як
not getting
набагато
operationalized
складніше,
like the
складніше
conflict
з цим
does.
працювати.
And it's much harder to work with polarities.
Коли
Let us imagine a situation.
умовно кажучи, в конфлікті
Let's say when we are in the conflict,
учасники,
there are always parties to the conflict.
там
For
Петро
example,
і Іван
there is Peter and John who are arguing
право на
about who has the right for the parking lot
або там будь-що з того, що
or
ви
anything else,
поділити майно, да.
how to actually divide
Оксана
property.
претендує на всю квартиру.
Oksana wants the whole of the apartment, and Alex says, no,
Квартиру будемо ділити.
it's not going to be yours. We're going to be
Тобто
dividing
завжди
it
є дві людини,
50-50. There are always at least two clear parties
коли ми кажемо про
who are in the conflict. But when we're talking about polarity, however, or about contradictions between the different poles, the properties are very different. There are sometimes very unclear and vague groups of parties. For example, youngsters versus the older generation.
молодь вважає то
Because
старші
young people think this way and the older people think
демократи і
different.
республіканці.
Democrats versus Republicans.
Республіканці кажуть так.
Their opinions are
Я думаю,
sometimes
що ви
they sometimes
можете
vary.
нашукати в
I think you
своєму
can find out
досвіді
in
досвід
your own experience a lot, like millions and millions of those polarities that exist on a daily basis.
не кажучи вже про те,
Not even talking about something else, that living in a situation of the war like we have today.
ці полярності, вони
Those polarities, in fact,
можливість
give
виживання.
us a chance to survive.
І приєднуючи себе до певної групи, ми
And when you
таким
join
робимо себе
certain groups
сильнішими.
of people, we become stronger, therefore.
Чому з ним працювати
Why it is,
простіше?
to
Хоча
me,
зрозуміло,
easier to
що
work with
треба
conflicts?
десь
I understand there are
і так далі.
secrets, there are stumbling
Тому
blocks, different approaches,
конфлікт
and techniques.
завжди
In the
є
conflict, however,
проблемою.
there's always a specific
Тобто,
problem
коли ми
that we
відповідаємо
have
на
to
питання,
resolve.
умовно кажучи,
When we're
що
trying to
треба
answer a
зробити,
question,
що треба
what
зробити,
do we do
які
or what do we
умови
have to
є,
do?
про це
This is action, this is
можна
behavior,
про
this
це
is
буде
something
простіше,
tangible. And it's much easier, therefore, to work with this.
має право там на це
Regarding who will have the right for that parking
коли
spot,
проводити ремонтні роботи.
or when we
А,
do the renovation,
ми будемо там
or when
доглядати
we,
за
how do we take
батьками,
care of our
оскільки вони
elderly
там не можуть за собою.
parents because
Все,
they
що
cannot
завгодно,
take care of themselves. Anything that can be answered specifically is that there is a problem and there's obvious solution through pursuing the interests of the parties. But when we're talking about polarities, then of course we think about identity in the first instance. We're not answering a question, what do we do in this situation of polarities? When working with polarities, we're trying to answer the question, who we are talking about specifically, who is the target population? Let us understand who we are in the first instance. A conflict always have a ratio. There is always emotion behind the conflict, but emotions that they can be mathematically, precisely, and logically used to resolve the conflict. We all need to have different techniques of working with emotions. We know what the emotions are for and what they serve, because emotions are required for us to pursue our interest, to build rapport with the parties, or maybe in some situations we can give opportunities to the parties to ventilate the situation a little bit, to get clear on that. But we understand, we use those tools, we've been using it like forever. Polarization, though, it says there is emotional level, and the emotional level is not about emotion, really. This is exactly about the irrational thing. It's very difficult to handle it, because what I'm talking about in this polarization process, this is about what is it there for me, as for a mother, as for Ukrainian, as for the resident of a town located close to the line of contact, whether I'm a Democrat or liberal party follower. However much you can work with emotion, because we've known so many techniques how to manage conflicts. Okay, we see the emotion, we see what's behind, and trying to look for a solution. It doesn't work this way here, because this is that emotional level that does not have any operational burden. This is the level that is not carrying anything about what's breached, what's clashed, and we cannot get those answers simplistically, because this is about who I am. The conflict may be over after a certain time. In our paradigm, as mediators, we are all aware that interest-based approach has high probability of resolving the conflict. It's going to be over. So the parties will be satisfied in terms of their interest. They're not going to come back to that issue again. They will follow the arrangements or an agreements that they reached in the process of conflict resolution, not coming back to that again. In polarities, this is different. It's not going to happen that way. Polarities are sometimes cyclical. It's like breathe in and breathe out. You can find no other solution here. You have to breathe in order to live. It's the same thing about polarities. That is why polarities cannot be resolved as we can handle conflicts. We can only manage polarities in those processes, in the conflict resolution processes. Because again, stepping a little bit ahead, I have to tell you that with our conflicts that we have to work with, apart from those clear questions that we have to ask about how to divide property, who shall have the right for the parking spot, how to take care of the child, etc. Those are clear issues. However, there is another ingredient here. I mean polarities. Conflict and polarities do not exist in silos. It's not like one or another. No, they sometimes mixed. And yes, to give you an example, here you have some. How we can manage those conflicts when neighbors sometimes have arguments about whose parking spot this is. But with polarities, you might have faced them in marriage dissolution cases. And in family mediation, this is when, for instance,
Мама, наприклад, каже,
a mother says, okay, you're my child. You have to study at a private school just because this is democratic upbringing process. This is individual approach to my child. She will be taken care of properly. She will feel confident. She's not going to need to be wearing the uniform. She'll be brought up in the best possible traditions. While the father can say, no, I deny this. She has to go to the public school because only that way she'll be able to understand what the truth of life is. She'll be only having a chance to learn how to live this life. She can only find true friends over there and not in private schools. This is again brings us back to the question that I asked to you at the very beginning. Have you ever seen this in your own experience that you're listening to the both parties and you think both of them are right in a sense, in a way, and it's like you can't find the solution really. The mother is right because, okay, she wants good care for the child, and the dad seems to be right as well because the truth of life, closer to reality, etc., etc. And you're sitting and thinking, oh my God, what shall I do with that? So when we're talking about conflicts, this either-or thinking, it's true for the conflicts. But when we're talking about polarity, the art and secret to handle polarities is in using this so-called end-end thinking, not either-or, but end-end. So we need to reformulate this polarity in a way that each of the parties could see his or her value that is important to him or her, that she or he is fighting for, trying to withstand his or her principles. You need to say it differently. Okay, how to encourage freedom of thought regarding how to take care of the child properly. And at the same time, so that this child is prepared for real life. So we use this end-end thinking instead of either-or. There is a brilliant conflictologist, Barry Johnson, his name is. And he wrote a great work, genius work, which is called Managing Polarities, I think. I'm going to demonstrate it to you later at the end of our conversation so that you can read more about it. So what Johnson is saying, he is trying to revisit the idea of polarities and the way they can be managed. He provides the model for it. I'm going to be running quickly through this model, and then we're going to, as much as I remember, we're going to move to the mediation. What a mediator needs to do whenever confronting polarities. I want to remind you, polarities, they are like extremes, the different poles of different values. Like, we have to be strict or more liberal. So there are two extreme poles about structured approach or flexible approach. We need like a clear organizational structure. Everybody needs to know who's doing what. And other people say, no, we have to be agile and adaptable. And the structure has to be like that. We're going to be handling everything that we confront with and quickly adapt, implement, make money, etc. No, the other party says, we need a sustainable, strict structure, clearly described, with proper hierarchy, whether it is horizontal or it's vertical, it has to be firmly standing on its feet. And we will rely heavily on a structure like this. In the course of work with polarities, those two extremes of values, they're opposing values. That's what polarity is about, and that's why it's different from the conflict. Conflict is based on the inch problem, while polarities are diametrically, extremely different values that are opposing one in front of the other, and one can do nothing with that. So the first question that we need to ask to ourselves whenever we confront polarities, and it's quite complicated, actually, we cannot quickly handle the case. It's not like a piece of cake. So we need to ask the question, where is the positive side in pole A, in an extreme opinion A? Like to having a strict structure. Let's talk about the advantages. Everything is predictable, it's efficient because everybody understands the rules, everybody knows what's going on, and one can assure quality this way. And here we ask another question, and what's the negative side of it? That's red tape, because structure is always about bureaucracy. This mechanism is slow and rigid. The same thing we do with the other party, with the opposing party. Okay, flexibility. What's in favor of adaptability, creativity, speed? And where's the negative side of it? What the drawbacks are? Chaos, lack of consistency, and loss of focus. Understanding this, we can look for a good solution that Barry Johnson calls in-depth values. Not something that lies on the surface, but something that is enshrined much deeper. And what can unite those two opposing extremes? If you look at everything that's written on the positive side and try to somehow combine or reformulate, we're going to have efficiency, effectiveness, and high satisfaction rate inside the team in an organization. That's why the background of working with polarities is that we're not choosing sides, either or, but we're trying to balance what's available out there. It's like two different stories, two different proposals that we need to combine to get a better performance for a certain period of time. It's not going to last forever, obviously, but instead of choosing either a clear, rigid structure versus flexibility, we try to ask a question. How can we build a structure that way which would encourage to quickly be adaptable? And now, let us move to something very clear, I hope. And I'm going to be talking about some of the tools that we can engage to be able to work with polarities quite effectively as mediators. In mediation, I mean. So a mediator, here are the three main techniques. Everything is very simple. As soon as you see that this process is about clashing interests and this is about polarities. Again, it's not about interest, this is about identity. Okay, because I am pursuing certain values, A, B, C, I'm a mother, I'm a Ukrainian, once again, any things related to identity, they provoke these kind of disparities between those extremes, our identity. This is something that we believe in. This is our mindset, and you cannot operationalize it. So these are the three key tools that we can use. When we replace either or by and technique, and here you can see that. Let's imagine a corporate story when you try to mediate inside the organization and you have like the customer care service. They normally talk about those extremes. We need to be super speedy in trying to satisfy our customers, to deliver services as soon as we can. If it takes so much time to produce something, to manufacture an item, instead of 2 weeks, we're going to be manufacturing it for a month. So our customers will leave and go somewhere else. Instead, for instance, there is a quality assurance unit, or whatever you want to call it. They say, no, we cannot sacrifice quality and standards because of the speed that you want to pursue in favor of that speedy process. Because as soon as we drop down the quality, okay, we can do it within 2 days. We don't care, but if it takes 2 days, then the quality will certainly deteriorate, and customers are not going to come back again. And here you can see two opposing opinions. There's a group of people who believe what's important for them. They say speed is everything. The sooner you serve the customer, the faster you respond, the more happier they are. There's another group of people, they say, the better quality the product is, the more satisfied the customers will be. They both are right, right? There is nothing bad or right or wrong in either of the opinions. However, but if we start choosing one of the two only, then of course, we're losing obviously something else and overlooking different other things. So it is our objective to identify those things and switch this mindset from either or to and. And we therefore can ask questions. How do we make sure that there is good quality within concise period of time? So we pursue both values. Of group 1 and group 2, we're trying to retain them and never lose them. There is another technique, number 2, super simple, super easy. It's called coming back to data. You can call it whatever you want. But actually, it is used when we work with stereotypes and prejudice. And especially when we work with polarities, there's a lot of bias and stereotypes. Because polarities are based on our identities and on the feeling that I am somebody, I belong to a certain group of people, and as soon as there are groups, that's it. This is us, and this is them, and that's when it polarizes communities. When we hear we as parents have been taking our kids to this school, and and those people came from Donbass, from the east of Ukraine. That's it. If you do not notice those details, because this is not only about a conflict, this is not just about a problem that we're trying to resolve, and it can be operationalized much easier and resolved through appeasing the interest. But when there is polarities, there are different mindsets. And you have to identify that. Otherwise, the decisions you make, they're not going to be durable. When you hear, these guys, they always do that. They are absolutely, I don't know, weird. They like chaos. They show no respect. They don't meet the deadlines. They are disrupting. They're disruptors. That's it. They disrupt everything. That's when mediators have to intervene. Can you tell me about the recent case that you've had when, in your opinion, Unit A confronted or stood on the way on project completion? It was their fault, for example. When you specifically saw that situation and you try to find out that tangible example to move it towards a problem, then if we turn this polarization into conflict, it's easier to manage it. Okay, we'd sent you the terms of reference last Friday, and you responded this Tuesday. So instead of the parties calling the other party those who disrupt, we see a specific problem here. Because the terms of reference had to be sent last Friday, and they never met the deadline. Is it easier to work with this? Yes. And people do not get offended because their identity is not getting offended, but they can see the specific problem that can be rationalized, operationalized, and worked with. And this is about common values, coming back to the previous slide. Each of those polarities that seem to be right, there's nothing wrong with it, with either of them. They're quite logical. But in order to understand how to be able to work with them, we can focus on not those differences, not on the things that divide, but on those values that unite, bring them together. I want to just give you an example, coming back to quality versus speed. We can ask, okay, and what do you want to do for your company? What's your organization is trying to do? what success means to you. I mean, success in an organization. Then I'm going to have answers like, okay, we want customer satisfaction, we want to have good reputation, profitability, etc., return on investment. And you see, instead of talking about we want speed, and those say we want quality, they're talking about deeper things that stand behind all those things, all those talking. That's a great gift for a mediator when you have that list. You just need to ask the right question. Okay, you says, I suggest to work on the processes or possible solutions that are going to combine both quality and speed, and this can contribute to much better performance of your organization, because these are the values that are shared between the both of you. And here are the examples. How can we reformulate or reword this thinking from either or into and. It is either control or freedom. The child needs freedom. No, the child has to be under control. You've probably seen this in many different occasions. How can we combine the required control with enough freedom? You says. Is it individual or this is teamwork? Or how to develop your personal talents for the benefit of the whole team? Either tradition or innovation. You can say it differently. How to maintain those valuable traditions by implementing the required change. This is just a brilliant thing. Brilliant wording. I love that. That was worded by one of the colleagues of mine, and I think this is a cool thing. All right. This is what I was thinking about practicing, giving you like a practical exercise. And you can now try to find a guinea pig, a colleague of you. Probably not at home because it's going to be difficult at home, probably at work. You better try it at work. And try to work it out in a group of 3. And this is going to be like mutual coaching. When there is argument between parents about the child's education, whether public school in real life or good quality education at a private school. And it is mediator's objective to apply this end-to-end practice, identify those values, and come back to the real needs of the child. These are the 3 techniques that I was trying to show to you. Just try to practice them.
Okay, there are some comments to the question in the beginning. Also, I'd like to remind you that we have some materials available both in Ukrainian and in English, and which means you can also see Alona's presentation in English and try to do this exercise. Anything else in conclusion?
Як краще, коментарі зараз?
Я, мабуть, давай, можливо, зараз, а потім я ще раз.
Would you like to take comments now? Yeah, let's do that now, and then we can summarize.
Так, я тоді відкриваю.
Okay, let me open. Well, from the chat, we have this. Conflict may finish, but polarity may be invoked through emotional component. Or shall I read everything through? I also opened the comments. Let me read through them. Let me see what's here. Polarity, well, I think the difference between polarity and interest, polarity are based on our identity, who I am, what I believe in, and polarity are opposite universes. Even when we state them, they are antagonistic. They may not have anything to do with interests, actually.
Так,
Альона,
це
у мене
є.
вже зведена інформація по коментам. Якщо так буде легше, можу все ж
Alona, I
таки.
have information for rooms.
Така опція. Ага, супер. Отже, був ще коментар про те, що були випадки
There was
про
also a comment regarding conflicts involving payment communal bills. Also, there was an issue regarding violation of with neighbors. Also, polarity as a component that not necessarily leads to conflict. There was also a comment regarding polarity and conflict of interests. And probably there's one more comment. Polarity can coexist peacefully and interact. Yet if one is trying to dominate, then there is a conflict of polarities. So if you could probably tell us a bit more about that.
Полярності можуть абсолютно
Polarities could exist
в цьому світі, вони існують, і кожного з
in
них
this world, and they do exist, and unlike conflicts,
суперечностей.
we don't see
Кожного дня бачимо суперечності в
contradictions,
інтересах своїх.
but we do have conflict of interests. Therefore, the point is that polarities can exist for a long time, but polarizing and radicalization and extremism, these are the processes that flow one from each other, and they're escalating. They happen not when someone wants to dominate, but when identity on one of the sides feels a threat. And when identity feels the threat, then we have this explosion. Polarity is a certain worldview, like your beliefs, like humanism, order, everything you believe in and everything that is critically important for you, and guidelines in terms of values. There's nothing to agree upon here because this is your essence. And if conflict can be accompanied by polarization, the parties are seemingly arguing over distribution of property. But in fact, I was supervising and a mediator shared her experience. She was leading a case and two parties were arguing over which world has the right to exist. And this has nothing to do with property. This is what people believe, and this complicates the work of mediator greatly. Now, what do you do as a mediator? Well, you notice those, because if you ignore this process of polarization, it's when you see that identity of the parties is touched upon or threatened. The goal of the mediator is to get back to the data
спробувати пошукати спільні
and
цінності.
try to search for new common values.
Це простіше робити, скажімо, там навколо
And it's easier to
що ми хочемо
do
для наших дітей в цій школі, де живуть
with things like what we want for our kids, where IDPs live and receiving family, how we see the environment for our children, how can we make sure that our child has both parents after divorce. These are three key tools that Mediator works with during polarities. Are there any other important comments? There are two questions.
Можу озвучити.
Так, будь
Так?
ласка, зараз не бачу.
Окей.
Yes, please go on.
Так, отже, пан Кирило запитував,
Kirillo was asking whether we can say that compromises in the polarities are effective, but in teams they're not.
Я би сказала, що це питання не на 10 хвилин, а може годинки на 3. Це таке
This
філософське питання.
it's a philosophical question. I mean, I could spend 3 hours answering it.
Продовжити попередню
It merits a panel of its own. in its own right. But to try to put it in a nutshell, I wouldn't say that compromises are possible in processes of polarization. I just wouldn't say that a compromise in polarization is more stable than a process in when we work with conflicts. A conflict and polarization are different in what tools are used. We are in conflict, we're trying to find a consensus, but in polarities, we're trying to find values behind polarities and try to find a common denominator using getting back to the data. And this is also about consensus. This is not about a compromise. Now, if we talk about compromise coexistence, then I agree. It could exist. But if we're talking about managing polarities, that's what it's all about.
Тут же колеги підключаються. Я бачу.
I can see colleagues are joining.
Оцей коментар, Каті, він дуже якраз слушний.
This comment makes sense because in any conflict, a party could agree for some compromise, but in polarities, however, I mean, you cannot negotiate values. So you can either accept someone else's values or not, because if you have to compromise on your values, it means you're losing a part of yourself, of part of who you are. So that's how it stands. Okay, Alona, another question from Katerina. Where do you see the conflict and how this can be settled peacefully so that clients can be resolved in their favor, but in a peaceful manner? Well, if we have polarities, in other words, two different poles in values, for you, a clear indicator for you could be that in your heart, you understand the rationale of both parties.
Ти абсолютно має рацію. Так внутрішньо я собі вважаю, ну, нічого такого. І той,
And
що
you
говорить про те,
see
що я не
nothing
можу
wrong.
пожертвувати, теж абсолютно правильно.
Like,
А відповідно, от ви як відчуваєте,
so you
це
feel
для вас має бути першим таким дзвіночком того, що
this, and this is probably the first indicator that this is no longer about conflict. This is more about polarities. And parties are drifting away from each other, migrating to their own poles. So our strategy here should be to try and bring polarities back to conflict, because we need to try to find the problem. And for that, it's often it's best to ask them to give a good example. And then we could use that example when they didn't do something, or such as she took the child to school and then she took a long time returning back home. And then we can search for interests. However, if it doesn't work, then we can switch to what we believe a good upbringing of the child. Then we switch to the level of values, and let's think together about how you can bring up your child so that everything you've enumerated stays true.
Тут ще прозвучало, напевно, останнє питання, як тоді співносяться
Probably the last question: how can you align compromise and values? But I think we approach this issue from different angles. Unless you want to add something, and we will probably wrap up. Okay, good. I can show you the last slide or just tell you about it. It's a slide featuring the checklist. I wrote it down about Barrett Johnson's book, and I think I will buy it. I think I will buy it. Thank you for your recommendation. There's also Bart Broad's book, Polarization and Understanding the Dynamics. This is another good book. I also covered it in my presentation. It explains polarization in a different way. And again, it's quite useful. And on our website, there will be polarity management in dialogues in our schools. That will become available within about 2 weeks' time. So I urge you to visit our website, and when it becomes available, I will circulate the information. Because for mediators, these are useful, really useful resources. So thank you for a very interesting presentation. It seems like a shame to part with you. Thank you for your wonderful recommendations and the books. We receive very positive feedback, and in the chat I see lots of thanks. Perhaps let's give us some likes, if technically this is possible. And I will pass on to Luisa. Thank you, Ola. Thank you, Olena. It's been a pleasure to hear about the in-depth approach to managing polarities, because Unfortunately, these are present in any society because life becomes more complicated, and sometimes even small things lead to people drifting apart, and some colors disappear from our life. Only black and white colors sometimes remain. So what you talked about help us bring